Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In this video, we're going to be discussing Severus Snape and his knack for creating all sorts of spells. Last week, I made a video where I explained, in depth, each of the 7 spells that Snape was responsible for creating. This list included the toenail growing hex, which causes the victim's toenails to grow alarmingly fast, langlock, which affixes the victim's tongue to the roof of their mouth, the muffliato charm, which fills the ears of anyone nearby with an unidentifiable buzzing, levicorpus, which lifts the victim's body into the air, liberacorpus, which drops them out of the air, vulnera sanentur, which heals the wounds inflicted by Sectumsempra, and lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Sectumsempra, which is a vicious dark curse that acts like an invisible sword, causing lacerations, haemorrhaging, and cuts upon its target. When Harry first takes Slughorn's potions class, he's without a textbook, and he's then instructed by Slughorn to go and find a spare one in the classroom. It's at this time that Harry finds Snape's old copy of Advanced Potion Making, and when he opened the textbook for the first time, he saw written inside, "This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince." Harry uses the book for quite some time, as for each and every one of Slughorn's lessons, the book provided easier and clearer instructions that he could follow. The book was like having cheat codes to all of the potions lessons, but inside the book was not just advice on how to make potions, or perfect existing spells, there were also spells written inside that were totally new to Harry. These were spells that he had never seen or heard of, and the reason no one knew about them was because they were invented by Snape. He created them. Spell creation isn't ever properly addressed in the Harry Potter books and films, and it's definitely a bit of a grey area. Why some witches and wizards seem to be able to create their own spells and some can't is left entirely unclear. While I was initially of the impression that it was a skill reserved for the immensely talented and dedicated, I then remembered that the famous fraudster Gilderoy Lockhart was also able to produce his own spell. Either he was extremely lucky, or Lockhart was actually quite talented underneath all of that vanity. Lockhart's spell resembled the Dark Mark in that it projected a glowing holographic image into the sky, but instead of the Dark Mark, it displayed Lockhart's cheesy grin. But of all of the witches and wizards that we're introduced to, Snape appears to have the most impressive portfolio of spell creation. So how did he do it? How does he create spells? Here's my theory. First things first, I think that you need to have a really clear idea of what you want your spell to achieve. This would include what it's for, why you're creating it, and how you might plan on using it. Once you've figured all of that out, you need to figure out the incantation of the spell. That is, the words that you'll utter as you're casting said spell. Unless, of course, you want the spell to be produced non-verbally, which is also an option for some spells. This was actually Snape's original intention with levicorpus. The following exchange between Hermione and Snape depicts his thoughts on non-verbal magic. Now, you are, I believe, complete novices in the use of non-verbal spells. What is the advantage of a non-verbal spell? Very well, Miss Granger. Your adversary has no warning about what kind of magic you're about to perform, which gives you a split-second advantage. An answer copied almost word for word from the Standard Book of Spells, grade 6, but correct in essentials. But even if the spell is produced non-verbally, it still needs a name, and I think that the name is important as it is tied to the magical properties of said spell. In Harry Potter, most of the spell books are written in Latin, so my best guess would be that the best place to start would be to figure out Latin root words that are related to the purpose of your spell. The name Sectumsempra comes from the combination of 2 Latin words, sectus, which means having been cut, and semper, which means always. We can see very clearly here that the incantation has a clear relationship to the function of the spell. Though the incantation derives from the Latin root words somewhat, i.e. sectum versus sectus, and semper versus sempra, we can see a clear connection here. Perhaps this deviation in the spell name is what makes spell creation so tricky, as if it was just as simple as looking up some Latin words and figuring out the spell's purpose, then I'd expect more to be doing it. Only a truly determined and patient witch or wizard would be up to the challenge of figuring out what combinations work well together. Extremely talented and extremely patient. Does that sound like someone we know? I think that after establishing the spell's function and after figuring out the Latin root words associated with the spell, the witch or wizard would then have to, through trial and error, experiment with different variations or deviations of the incantation. Additionally, I would imagine that the intent would have to exactly match the incantation, meaning that if they uttered the correct incantation without the matching intent, then it still wouldn't work. Spell creation is often dubbed as dangerous, and I can see how playing with the delicate forces of magic might sometimes produce unfavorable results. Another angle that could possibly work for a spell creating witch or wizard might be to look at spells already in existence that share some sort of commonality with the spell that you're wanting to produce. Snape's Sectumsempra is not the only spell with the word sempra in it, as in the series we are also introduced to rictusempra. We know that Harry uses Sectumsempra on Malfoy, but he actually uses rictusempra on him as well. The following excerpt depicts this. Harry pointed his wand straight at Malfoy and shouted, "Rictusempra!" A jet of silver light hit Malfoy in the stomach, and he doubled up, wheezing, as Malfoy sank to his knees. Harry had hit him with a tickling charm, and he could barely move for laughing. Rictusempra is derived from the Latin rictus, which means the expanse of an open mouth, and the Latin semper, which, as we have already established, means always. This means that the incantation in its entirety roughly means always laughing, or laugh forever, similar to Sectumsempra's always cut or cut forever. Rictusempra is commonly used in duels, and is used to cause the victim to buckle with laughter, entirely unable to help themselves. The spell was not invented by Snape, but perhaps he drew inspiration from the latter portion of the incantation, when producing his own spell, Sectumsempra. We know Snape as the cold, calculated professor that haunts Harry for most of his time at the school, but Snape is actually one of the most diverse characters in the series, haunted by the actions of his past and his troubled childhood. Snape was the potions master at Hogwarts for a whopping 15 years, and his personal copy of Advanced Potion Making is just another signifier that Snape was more devoted to his work in potion making than anyone else. It's his passion. In the Philosopher's Stone, he says the following to his potions class. "I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death." What Snape is really saying here is that if you have enough talent and dedication, you can really do anything with potions. We know that Snape makes improvements on the potions recipes in his book while he was a student at the school, and this directly implies that he was an experimenter. He liked to do things in his own way, and achieve things in the most efficient way possible. Bearing this in mind, it's likely that Snape, in an effort to create his own spells, took existing spells and played with them until he got his desired result, the same way that he played with potions recipes. So we need to think, Sectumsempra, is there anything similar that Snape could have derived inspiration from? The answer is yes. In Miranda Goshawk's book of spells, Diffindo, aka the Severing Charm, is described as follows. With the Severing Charm, cutting or tearing objects is a simple matter of one control. The spell can be quite precise in skilled hands, and the Severing Charm is widely used in a variety of wizarding trades. Useful as it is, the charm should be practiced with caution, as a careless swipe of the wand can cause injury. Diffindo was invented in the 15th century by wizarding seamstress Delphina Crimp. Diffindo comes from the Latin first-person active indicative for to split, cleave, or open. If we look at the after effects of Sectumsempra, we can really start to draw some parallels. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. He staggered backward and collapsed onto the waterlogged floor with a great splash, his wand falling from his limp right hand. Slipping and staggering, Harry got to his feet and plunged toward Malfoy, whose face was now shining scarlet, his white hand scrabbling at his blood-soaked chest. So, as you can see, the two spells are really quite similar. However, here are the differences that we know of. Sectumsempra is a curse, and Diffindo is just a charm. Additionally, organs severed with Sectumsempra can't be grown back. We see this with George Weasley, while those severed with Diffindo likely can. My best guess is that Snape was inspired by the properties of Diffindo, but wanted to weaponize it. He hated the Marauders, and they were his sworn enemies, and in his spellbook he even labeled Sectumsempra with a note, "For enemies." My theory is that Sectumsempra is a combination of the properties of Diffindo and Rictusempra. Snape's affinity for potions and the dark arts, paired with his hatred for the Marauders, resulted in the creation of Snape's powerful curse. He took an innocent charm used to cut herbs and materials and turned it into a dark curse that could tear through human flesh. The only real glaring problem with the Latin root argument part of this theory is that in the Harry Potter universe there are witches and wizards all over the world, and many of them don't speak a language that has a Latin base. This confuses things, but my thought was that In a magical world where seemingly anything is possible, the magical presence, location, and intent of the caster accounts for the wizard or witch's specific utterance of the incantation. This means that you would be able to use your own root language to produce an incantation that creates the same spell. It just wouldn't make sense that all spells are Latin-based. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you guys have any further questions or comments, leave them down below. If you enjoy the content, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, you're Wizard Harry!